Thank you. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. What am I going to talk about? A little bit to introduce myself, some information about Muslims and Jews in the UK and their common interests, and then I want to talk in more detail about the Muslim-Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester, how we designed it, because it was designed very carefully, and why it works. I've also been asked to talk about what it's done for me personally, so I'm going to cover that. And then my co-chair, Heather Fletcher, is going to talk in a lot more detail about what we do, the very many events we've run since we first got started. And then at the very end, we will take questions and answers. So myself, I've lived in Manchester since I was 2. I went to grammar school, read mathematics at Cambridge, and spent my entire professional career, apart from 1 year teaching in the accountancy profession, almost all of that as a tax advisor. And I was the first Muslim to become a partner in the UK firm of Price Waterhouse, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I'm currently the co-chair of the Muslim-Jewish Forum, which, along with Heather Fletcher and others I helped to start. Our key inspirations were Afzal Khan, who is now the MP for Manchester Gorton, and the late Henry Gutterman, who was a past president of the Jewish Representative Council for Greater Manchester and Region. I've also got some past roles which I think are worth mentioning. For a long time I was the chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, and I was a member of the Conservative Party for over 36 years, resigning on the day that Mr. Johnson was announced as its new leader. So you can see my politics. And also, quite interestingly, I was for 18 months a member of the Council of Salford University. So although my knowledge is not up to date now, because I resigned from council for diary reasons in 2013, or 2014 I think it was, I was very familiar with the affairs of Salford University at that time. So to start with, some information about Muslims and Jews in the UK. The two communities are very different. For a start, one is 10 times bigger than the other. They've been here for very different periods of time, and it's amazing what a difference a century can make, because the big influx of Jewish immigration into the UK started around about 1880, when there were very serious pogroms in Russia. And so probably 2 generations at least, maybe 3 generations ahead of the big influx of Muslims into the UK, which started in the 1950s and really gathered pace in the 1960s and more recently. In terms of the number of MPs, historically, Jewish people have been well overrepresented in Parliament compared to the number of Jews in the country. And I subscribe to a newspaper called the Jewish Chronicle, which now has stopped publishing the information in quite the same way. But at one stage they used to publish the names of all the Jewish MPs in Parliament, and they were at one stage nearly 10%. Well, you can see the arithmetic. Jews are about 0.5% of the population or less. Muslims, historically, there weren't any in Parliament at all until 1997, when the first Muslim MP was elected. And now there are, I still haven't actually seen a full count after 2019, but after 2017, I think there were I think it was 15 MPs. But so it's growing.
Who was the first Muslim?
The first Muslim MP was in Glasgow. It was Ghulam Sarwar, who has since moved back to Pakistan, renounced his British citizenship, which I think he needed to do for legal reasons, and is the governor of the province of Pakistan, which is a massive province. The Punjab in Pakistan has a population of over 100 million by itself, so it's a massive province. Educationally, Jews have historically had very high educational standards. Muslims, when they came to the UK, like my parents, were completely illiterate, most of them. Some of them came to be students at universities, but most were illiterate. And my parents were completely illiterate, but their son went to Cambridge. And the mix of Muslims is changing very dramatically. They have a very high tendency to go to university, for example, compared to people who are white British. And Muslims are ethnically very diverse. Historically, most of the community was from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, but in recent decades we've had very big influx from places like the Arab countries, Somalia, Nigeria, Kosovo, refugees from Bosnia, so it's a very, very diverse community ethnically. The demographics are quite interesting. This information is from the 2011 census, and the green bars are the proportion of Muslims, not absolute numbers, just relative proportions of Muslims. So each set of bars adds up to 100%, but it's a question of where the people are distributed. And you can see that Muslims are a very young demographic. The 0 to 9 age group has over 20% of the total population of Muslims in the UK, whereas Jewish people in the UK are a much older demographic. And that, I think, is quite interesting in terms of understanding some of the dynamics in the community. And I've got a 2-page list of common interests, and I didn't need to make this up. I simply went to the Muslim Jewish Forum Statement of Principles, because we have 9 key principles, and one of the things in that list of 9, I think item 8 from memory, is a long list of things that Muslims and Jews have in common and believe and need in the UK, things that we care about. Because my view is that the biggest divide in society today when it comes to religion is not between different religious groups. Never mind the divide between Protestants and Catholics, for example. Even the divide between Christians and Muslims or Christians and Jews is insignificant compared with the massive divide between those people who have some religious belief, regardless of what that might be, and those who have no belief. And people who have no religious belief find it very hard to understand individuals who feel answerable to God and who derive their inspiration and some of the rules for how they want to live their lives from their religious beliefs. That is the biggest gulf in understanding in society as far as I'm concerned. This is the rest of our statement of principles. You know, circumcision is a good example. Every so often you get people, never religious people, always secularists, atheists in fact, not just secularists. I'm a secularist, I believe in the division of church and state, but people who have no religious beliefs trying to ban circumcision. And this kind of pressure is much better resisted if we act together than if we act separately. So I want to go on now to some of the design choices that we made when we set up the forum. The way that the forum came to be set up was after a public meeting. Then there was a small organising committee. Heather was on that organising committee, as was I. The constitution was written jointly by me and a Jewish barrister called David Barclay QC, who's a member of our executive committee. And to be honest, if you get a tax partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers and a Queen's Counsel writing a constitution, you get a constitution in spades, which sometimes has its own challenges, but we are a company limited by guarantee. So we are a membership organisation, and our purpose is entirely domestic. If you go to our website and look at our written purpose, which I'm going to show you as well later on, you'll see that it is entirely focused on Greater Manchester. And that was quite deliberate, because when I started talking to people about creating the Muslim Jewish Forum, chat to your friends, the instant response I got from everybody is, don't Muslims, Jews always fight? And that is because people are thinking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is sadly immensely divisive. And our view was that if we ever got into a discussion about Israel and Palestine, we would never talk about anything else. It would have become all-absorbing. So we carefully put it out of scope, as you'll see. Some other design choices. We are not a religious organization. And this point has actually become quite relevant recently as a result of some discussions that a member of our executive committee had with an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who was complaining about us, saying we're not a religious organization, which is why he didn't want to come and talk to us. We have no special role for religious leaders. We have had rabbis come to our events quite regularly. We're willing to have rabbis on our executive committee or imams, but they are there simply as people if they get onto our executive committee. We are not a religious organization. We don't have a religious leadership. So we're all grassroots people. Similarly, while we do have, for example, Heather Fletcher, who's now a member of Salford City Council, we had Afzal Khan, our original co-chairman, who was a member of Manchester City Council at the time. He was there just because he was there as a person, not because he was a councillor. We have no civic representation. We are entirely independent, freestanding. Nobody is allowed to nominate people onto our executive committee. They get elected by the members. And everybody's a volunteer. And our constitution says that our executive committee needs to have 5 Muslims and 5 Jews, if at all possible, and we have a Muslim co-chair and a Jewish co-chair. And we run on a shoestring. In some years, our turnover has been sort of £400. And that, again, is a deliberate choice, because if you go out looking for people for grants, what do you do when the grant runs out? So we design the way that we run so we don't need other people's money. So I promised to show you our mission. We're about the Muslim and Jewish communities of Greater Manchester. We also want to communicate with the wider community about issues of common interest, but the key thing is that it's about cultural and social ties in Greater Manchester. And every time somebody says, why don't we have an event about Israel and Palestine, or why don't we provide a platform to these visiting people who want to talk about Middle East peace, we say no. And we say no matter how worthy these people might be. In my private life, I'm a donor to many Middle East peace organizations, and one of them is the Bereaved Families Forum, where you've got Jewish and Muslim people from Palestine who are coming to talk about the losses that they've suffered, the death of a child or a brother or a sister, and how they now work towards reconciliation. When I was asked to promote an event run by them, I said no, because you have to be totally clear where you stand. And as soon as you deviate from that, suddenly you've lost your foundation. Why does it work? As I said, we run on a shoestring. We're not answerable to anybody else. We put on events that we want to put on, that our executive committee would be interested in having, and we hope will appeal to other people. But we don't ask other people's permission. Can we put on an event? We put on events that we want to put on. And since a lot of our executive committee, including me and Heather, like eating, lots of our events involve going out to eat. And we have limited objectives. We are about Greater Manchester. One of our past executive committee members did suggest that there is a crying need for a Muslim-Jewish organization in the country as a whole. And I agree, there is a crying need. But unfortunately, we cannot fill that need. It would take more time, more effort, etc. to achieve that. We can't do it. What we can do is keep going in Greater Manchester. And over the 15 plus years that we've been in operation in Greater Manchester, we have made a real difference. So what's it done for me personally? And it comes back to my own goals for setting it up and what it's meant for me. And one of the things that I'm now 69 years old, and one of the things I'm becoming increasingly conscious of is that although I had a start in life that was objectively very deprived, my parents were incredibly poor, they were illiterate, I grew up in the slums of Manchester, in Chorlton and Medlock and Moss Side. I was also very privileged. My parents doted on me, they stayed together till they died. You saw that I went to Cambridge University, I've had a fabulous career. God has been incredibly generous towards me, and the only way that you can show gratitude and repay that kind of thing is by helping other people. And I do one-to-one mentoring, I run organizations like the Muslim Jewish Forum, and I write and speak. Tomorrow I'm talking to 2 schools in Blackburn for the Charity Speakers for Schools. Tonight I'll be on BBC Radio 4's The Moral Maze, which is having a program on Islamophobia, and I'll be in Media City at the end of a microphone because everybody else will be in London. And part of what I do is trying to bring Muslims and Jews in Greater Manchester closer together. I had Jewish friends at school, I've had Jewish colleagues at work. For 20 plus years, my most important client was actually a Reformed Jew from America. So it's a subject I care about enormously. Some byproducts. First of all, I've gained friends. We didn't set this up to become friends. When we started on the organising committee, I knew nothing about Heather at all. Yeah. She now has a Tory for a friend, which I'm sure helps her with her colleagues on Salford City Council enormously. I got to know many national Jewish leaders. I know the current and the previous 3 presidents of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I've sat next to the chief rabbi all the way through a dinner when we had our 10th anniversary dinner. I met the Israeli ambassador on many, many occasions. We travelled a lot, both in Europe to do with the forum, although everybody pays their own way. The forum doesn't spend a penny on any of us. And I've learned a lot about Israel and Palestine. I've been there twice, although not organised by the forum, because the forum has nothing to do with Israel and Palestine. And somebody who actually was a member of our executive committee, I've since discovered, nominated me for an MBE, which I received for what I've done for community relations in Greater Manchester. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to my co-chair, Heather Fletcher, to talk about our events.